Today we are going to be starting solving equations. By the end of this unit, you will be solving equations that have like terms that we already did and distributive property. But first we need to get the basics of solving equations down. So an equation is two expressions set equal to each other. If you cannot fit it in there on your notes, just do your best. You can move up here if you need to. So it's two expressions. So an expression is a set of terms. It might have numbers and variables or just numbers. So an equation is two expressions with the equal sign in the middle of them. So here's an example of an equation, and we need to label the coefficient, the constant, the variable, and then circle the equal sign. So this has one term on the left and one term on the right. Remember the coefficient. The coefficient is the number that is multiplied by the variable. So in this question, the coefficient is 12. The variable is the letter that takes the place of the number. In algebra, the variable is always what you're trying to find. So we're trying to figure out what x is. If you have an expression, you cannot figure out what x is. You can only figure out what x equals if it's set equal to something else and you have an equation. Then the constant, remember constant means it never changes. The constant is a number by itself without any variables. And then they tell us to circle the equation sign. So there's the equation sign. In order to solve one-step equations, our goal is to get the x by itself. So the word that is always used in algebra is to isolate. So you're going to isolate the variable by using inverse operations. And inverse means opposite operations. So our goal is to get the variable all by itself, get the variable by itself using its opposite. We've been talking about this all year. What are some opposites? So if we have addition, the opposite or the inverse of addition is subtraction. And then the inverse of multiplication is division. And then it's backwards too, that the inverse of subtracting is adding, the inverse of dividing is multiplying. They will cancel each other out. And with fractions, if you have a fraction coefficient, there's a couple ways you can solve it, but the fastest way is if the coefficient, the number in front of the variable, is a fraction, then you multiply by the reciprocal. So that means like we divide by the reciprocal. When we divide, we do copy, change, flip. So you will multiply by 2/3. And then the other thing that you have to know is that you're going to do the opposite operation, but everything you do, you have to do to both sides. So everything that you do, whatever you do on one side, you have to do on the other to keep it balanced. So let's look at some examples. So example 1, we have x over 3 equals 9. So first you have to decide what your operation is. That is division. So to cancel out division, I will use multiplication. Also, when you solve an equation, you should draw a line down at the equal sign so that you know where your two sides of the equation are, because whatever you do to one, you have to do to the other. Then 3 divided by 3 turns into a 1, so we're just left with x equals 9 times 3 is 27. And then you should always check your equations. So we should always go back and plug our number in to double check it. So I have 27 over 3, 27 divided by 3 equals 9. And so all I did is I took my 27 and I replaced it with the x. And 27 divided by 3 is 9. So 9 equals 9. We know we are correct. So now in the second example, we have x minus 1.3 equals 10.1. Don't let decimals scare you. Your calculator will take care of your decimals. We draw a line down at the equal sign. We find our variable is x. We have to cancel out a minus 1.3. To cancel out a minus or a negative, you will have a positive. So we will add that exact thing. We're going to add 1.3, and whatever you do to one side, you do to both sides. So we will add 1.3 to both sides. And then what happens is when you have a negative 1.3 and a positive 1.3, it makes a 0. So they zero out, and you don't have to bring a 0 down. They just zero out. We have canceled them out. And on the other side, we bring down the x, we bring down the equal sign, and on the other side, we just add those, and we will get 11. And now you're going to do the check with the Edpuzzle video. Next, we have 12x equals negative 3. So right there, one thing I would suggest is you always write the multiplication dot in between. So that's kind of small. It's kind of hard to write it in there. But that means 12 times x. That'll make your brain stop and think, okay, that's multiply. So how do I cancel out multiply? With division. Remember, a fraction and divide is the same thing. So I have 12x divided by 12, and 12 divided by 12 is a 1. So we actually make it a 1. And that turns into 1x, but you don't need the 1 in front of the x. So it's just x equals, and then we work out the other side. You could turn it into a decimal and get negative, that should be negative 0.25. Give me one second. Negative 0.25, or you could have left it a fraction, which would be a negative 1/4. Now you're going to check that with the Edpuzzle video. Now question 4, we have x plus 7 1/2 equals 15. So our variable is x, our fraction is 7 1/2. I draw my line at the equal sign. I know I need to get x alone, so I'm going to subtract 7 1/2. Whatever I do to one side, I do to both sides. So I subtract 7 1/2 from both sides. On this side, a positive 7 1/2 and negative 7 1/2, they cancel out because they're opposites. So I will end up with x equals 5 minus 7 1/2. You are going to be allowed to use your calculator for that, and you will either get negative 2.5 or negative 2 1/2. They're the same thing. And now here, we have a couple choices that we could do here. We could look at this as two different operations and say that that is negative 4/7. We could think, well, that's division and cancel out division first. And then that's 4 times x and cancel out multiplication first. But that shortcut that we could figure out is that we learned at the beginning of the notes, you could also multiply by the reciprocal. So I could multiply by negative 7/4. If you check it in your calculator, negative 7/4 times negative 4/7 will turn into 1. So that will turn into 1x. And then here we'll multiply negative 8 times negative 7/4, and negative 8 times negative 7/4 is positive 14. And then example 6, we have negative 8 plus x equals 12.25. So if I have negative 8 plus x, my x is my variable. So I'll draw my line at my equal sign. And I know that x is the variable, and I need to cancel out the negative 8. It doesn't matter that the 8 is in front of the x instead of behind. It's still the exact same thing. We're going to cancel out a negative 8 by adding 8. So we're going to add 8 to both sides. Negative 8 and positive 8, they z out. That leaves me with just x equals 12.25 plus 8 is 20.25. Now we're looking at a visual representation for question number 5. So question 7. So question number 7, it says write and solve an equation for the model shown before. So there's the equal sign. So I need to figure out this expression. On this expression, I have 3 x's. We don't know what they are yet, so that's just 3x. And then over here, I have all these negative ones. And so if you count them, you will figure out that that is negative 12. And since that is 3x, this way is just showing you, sorry, where's my highlighter? So this way is just showing you what actually happens when you are canceling out multiplication with division. So this means that I have 3 groups here. So if I cut them into 3 groups, there's one group, and then here's another x, there's my other group, and then my last x, there's my third group. So I know that each x is worth 4 negatives. So my solution, my answer would be x equals negative 4. And if we were to divide, negative 12 divided by 3 is negative 4. Now you're going to put what you did in the first lesson with writing equations from word problems and solving equations together in these next 3 examples. So you're going to do those and check those with the Edpuzzle video.